Alright, so again, soluble salts are salts that can dissolve in water. Insoluble salts are salts that cannot dissolve in water. So these are the examples of the soluble salts. These are the examples of the insoluble salts. So again, like I mentioned, all common salts of sodium, potassium, and ammonium are soluble in water. Alright, all common triazonitrate 5 salts of metals are soluble in water. So all common triazonitrate 5 of metals are soluble in water. Then most common chlorides are soluble in water, alright, except silver 2 chloride, mercury 2 chloride, and lead 2 chloride. These 3 chlorides are insoluble in water. They are under the insoluble salts. Alright, that means they do not dissolve in water. Then most common tetrasulfate 6 are soluble in water except these 4. Except barium tetrasulfate 6, lead-2 tetrasulfate 6, and calcium tetrasulfate 6. So these salts are insoluble in water. Alright. Most common tetrasulfate 6 are what? Are soluble in water except these 3. So it's very important that you should know that calcium tetrasulfate 6 is sparingly soluble in water. Sparingly. It means that it dissolves in water but not completely. Alright. It does not completely dissolve in water. Alright. So it's very important that you should know these 3 examples: barium tetrasulfate 6, lead-2 tetrasulfate 6, and calcium tetrasulfate 6. These salts are what? Are insoluble in water. And you should note that this calcium tetrasulfate 6 is sparingly soluble in water. What that means is that it dissolves in water only to a little extent. Alright, it does not dissolve completely. Then, so let's look at this example that I gave, this question that I gave earlier again. Which of the following salts is soluble in water? So you should know that barium tetrasulfate 6 is an example of an insoluble salt. You should also know that sodium chloride is an example of a soluble salt because it's sodium, right? Like I said, all common salts of sodium, potassium, and ammonium are soluble in water. So you should note that barium tetrasulfate 6 is insoluble in water. Is insoluble in water. And that is the point we've just established here, that most common tetrasulfate 6 are soluble in water except barium tetrasulfate 6, lead-2 tetrasulfate 6, and calcium tetrasulfate 6. These are insoluble in water. Then the last point we're going to look at here is that triazocarbonate 4 of sodium, potassium, and ammonium are soluble in water. All other triazocarbonate 4 are insoluble in water. Alright? So only the triazocarbonate 4 of sodium, of potassium, and ammonium are soluble in water. The rest triazocarbonate 4 are insoluble in water. So we have sodium triazocarbonate 4, we have potassium triazocarbonate 4, and we have this is 2, and we have ammonium triazocarbonate 4. These 3 triazocarbonate 4 salts are soluble in water. All the rest triazocarbonate 4 are insoluble. Alright, very important. So let's look at this question. Which of the following salt is soluble in water? Which of the following salts is soluble in water? So barium tetrasulfate 6 is insoluble in water. Alright. Sodium chloride is soluble in water. Lead-2 triazocarbonate 4 is insoluble in water. The only soluble triazocarbonate 4 salt is that of sodium. Alright, sodium triazocarbonate 4, potassium triazocarbonate 4, and ammonium triazocarbonate 4. These are the only 3 triazocarbonate 4 salts that are soluble in water. The rest are insoluble. Alright. Then we have here silver 2 chloride. It is insoluble in water. Alright. So like we mentioned before, most common chlorides are soluble in water except silver 2 chloride, mercury 2 chloride, and lead 2 chloride. So silver 2 chloride is an example of what? An insoluble salt. All right. So again, the correct answer to this question is what? Option B. All right. So you should really know this table. It's very important. Again, soluble salts are salts that are soluble in water or that can dissolve in water, while insoluble salts are salts that do not dissolve in water. All right.